It's the sound of the start of your weekend, and today George is looking to strike McGold, while I think my next best is mustard. Yes, this show also contains the most predictable pick of the season on the betting show so far. Have a think. Guess what it is? Yep, you're probably spot on. A few other bits as well, including a 9-1 unders quad, and that'll be the pod. Welcome to the NTT20 betting show. It's sponsored by AK Bets. It's for over 18s only. And George and myself, Ali, will be making betting picks ahead of a full slate of EFL action. Because of that, it is for over 18s only, and we ask that everyone watching or listening be gamble aware. If you're thinking of placing a bet this weekend or any time, do be aware of the risks. Never bet more than you can afford to lose. Never chase your losses. Be disciplined if you are thinking of having a bet, and head to begambleaware.org if you'd like to brush up on the risks that come with gambling and understand them better. The highlight of last week's show was George's 130 next best winner, Portsmouth, against Borough. Very nicely done. My highlight of the last week was picking Sunderland draw no bet at Burnley and watching Wilson Isidore have not one but two penalties saved in the last trappings of that game. You often think that you have already felt every possible emotion in winning or losing bets, but I'll admit, George, I unlocked a new one there. I don't think I've ever felt quite like that. I was standing in my front room, head in hands, for probably about 15 minutes. The draw no bet meant that at least it wasn't a losing nap, but it wasn't the winner that I wanted either. And no success elsewhere. McEntee and Puerta didn't give me double-figure goal-scorer winners. Huddersfield gave Blackpool a 2-goal lead and still managed to draw 2-2, but no winner for my next best. And you had a nap loser in Derby, no Colby Bishop goal. Bristol City didn't beat Coventry to 0, and the unders quad was way worse than usual. Way worse than usual.
How many goals was it?
Millions of goals. And they all seemingly scored super early as well. I think all the games had 2 goals within about 10 minutes.
But Fleetwood Salford copped 2.5 to 5 minutes, and then no more.
No, that'll do. Let me hear what your best bet of the weekend is, George. What's your nap?
Fleetwood, they are my nap. I've backed Fleetwood at 10 to 11 with AK Bets to beat Carlisle, and I think it's a big price. And I've had a thing about Fleetwood basically all season, where I'm pretty convinced that given the players they've got at their disposal, their general performance level, and I think they're better than the league table says they are. I think they're better than the market generally thinks that they are. And for them to be hosting a Carlisle side who are in kind of dire straits right now, and be getting just under even money at home is, to me, a massive bet. It wasn't that long ago. It was the end of October where Fleetwood hosted Salford, a Salford side who are now in the promotion spots, who've gone on this incredible long run, and I absolutely battered them. They drew the game 2-2, but it was 17 shots to 11. It was 2.6 XG to 0.8, and they conceded very late on, and again, they should have won. And that is the kind of performance level that I thought we were going to expect going forward from Fleetwood. And I remember even that evening looking at Fleetwood prices for promotion and to win the league, but it went the other way, where they went on after that game, they did beat Bradford 1-0, but they went on a poor run, and it meant that we saw the end of Charlie Adam as manager, and he's been replaced
brilliantly.
By Pete Wild, who is someone who did an unbelievable job at Barrow, who I think we probably anticipated wouldn't be taking on a job in the bottom half of League Two when he came back. And to me, this is, for all of the off-field issues, for all of the previous owner being in prison and other things going on there, it's another sign to me that there is still significant ambition from Fleetwood Town, and that their recent malaise isn't anything more than just some bad luck and some, a bit of a dip in terms of what we'd expect from them. But that's not because there's been a scaling back from investment or chronic off-field issues. I think it's just one of those things. And I still maintain that last season they were very unlucky to get relegated. And with the form sliding under Adam, I kind of wonder if it may just be a case where they had those games like the Salford one where they were playing pretty well, not getting over the line, and heads drop, and there's some frustration that creeps in, which seeps into the performances. But now with Pete Wild in, someone who we know is so good at drilling a defence, someone who at Barrow got them punching massively above their weight, and already we're seeing a pretty obvious uptick in performance level, where the reverse, that game I was just talking about, Fleetwood going to a Salford side who have been so strong in recent weeks and winning the game 2-0. Fleetwood in midweek playing MK Dons, beating them 2-1 at home. I think this is a side that, in my opinion, between now and the end of the season, will be posting a points tally that will be around the top 6. And if they are a top 6 team, as I think they are, and they're hosting a Carlisle side who are just so relentlessly poor and so out of form. One win dating back to mid-November, with the fan base really turning on Mike Williamson in recent weeks. I can't really believe we're getting 10 to 11 about them to win it. So this is a very obvious one to me, where Fleetwood should make pretty light work of Carlisle.
So relentlessly poor. Just a really cutting way to describe a football team. And I can't disagree with it at all. I watched the Carlisle-Bradford game last weekend, wrote up a 800-word piece on Carlisle for the weekend notes, and I wanted to see green shoots. I wanted to see that the 8 new January signings they've made were having an instant impact, and I don't think that was the case. So I'm very on board with that. I mean, why is Sunderland to beat Argyle to 0 at 11-10 not your nap? It is my nap, and I called it the most predictable pick of the season. The only thing that I can't believe is that it's not your nap. You must feel very strongly about Fleetwood Town. I think that's become clear by the way that you've spoken about them ever since their relegation from League One. And I don't even know if you have this, but as a competitive man, I very much think of Fleetwood as like your League Two stance this season. And I think of Colchester as mine. And it's quite a fun sort of season-long battle that we're having,
very well.
which hasn't really gone very well. But I'm still feeling, as you know, pretty good about Col. You 2 points behind Fleetwood, albeit having played 2 games more. So there you go, and more on both of those teams later from me. But it is Sunderland to win to 0 that is my best bet of the weekend. 11-10 with AK bets for Sunderland to beat Argyle to 0 at the Stadium of Light on Saturday. And this has landed in 6 of 13 Sunderland home games, where they've been really strong this season, and 10 of 14 Argyle away games. We have spoken at length about such topics as Championship teams winning to 0, specifically Plymouth Argyle losing away games to 0. And it's clearly been a real theme of the pod this year. And that's kind of zooming out and looking long-term at the season-long stats. But I think if you zoom in to these two teams, I think that one team, Sunderland, was already great and is getting better. And I think that the other team, Argyle, was already bad. And there are signs that they are managing to get worse over the last few weeks, right? So in a Sunderland sense, I'm very strong on them at the moment. That's been clear on the mid-season predictions pod. Last week's betting show really felt that they'd be the better side at Burnley. They were the better side at Burnley. I can't think of the last time that Sunderland played poorly since probably the first half of the game against Blackburn on Boxing Day, where they were poor and they came roaring back in the second half. The game was drawn 2-2. They should have won it. They conceded late on. But if you look at their underlying performance data, if you look at the Ben Griffiths incredible resource, which is free for anyone to use, which has the most incredibly in-depth data on Championship, League One and League Two, it's football-match-reports.streamlit.app if you want to play around with it. You can look at all sorts there. And what I've found when I asked the question, when did Sunderland last play poorly? And is it true, as I think, that they are getting better throughout the season, even having started so strongly? If you look at that, you can look at a log of all of their matches so far, and you can look at so many different metrics. And one of the many that you can look at, non-penalty XG difference in each game. So balance of chances, taking out penalties for every game that they've played. And Sunderland's worst 10 games of the season in terms of non-penalty expected goal difference, all of them came before December. So we've had 2 pretty full months of EFL action, loads of games played, probably almost half the season, frankly, in that time. And all of their worst games on that metric were before then, which I think is a good sign that Sunderland are definitively getting better and still hitting incredible performance levels and avoiding poor performances almost entirely recently. They're not dropping off at all. They're quite the opposite of that. Whereas Argyle, look, I think their 1-0 defeat to QPR last weekend was incredibly alarming, specifically because it was a home game. But they played as they have been playing away from home all season. Didn't lay a glove on QPR. Comfortably beaten, should have been a bigger scoreline than 1-0. They followed that up on Wednesday night by being 5-0 down at half-time to Burnley. I'm not really going to get into the weeds of the performance. It's clearly a disaster. I think sometimes there can be a bit of overreaction to it, but with the case being with Argyle at the moment, they're doing so poorly. They've sacked Wayne Rooney. They brought in the new guy. It's not going well. You can see where the overreaction comes from. The fans have just realised, we're we're probably still not going to stay up, even though we've got rid of the manager and Wayne Rooney that we thought was really poor. Whatever Miron Muslic has tried so far has not worked in the slightest. In fact, I think it's possibly made the team worse, which is unfortunate. In their last 4 games in the league, only 2 of which he's been in charge of, they've had 4 shots and 1 on target, 4 shots and 1 on target, 11 shots with 2 on target. That was against Oxford at home. And then 2 shots with 1 on target against Stoke City. So very little attacking output over the last 4 games. That plays in our favour here. Clearly the risk of this bet, win to nil, as we found back in Walsall to beat Tranmere to nil the other day when they won 5-1 and the bet was a loser, is that they just need to score a goal for the bet to die. And it can come from anywhere. And the goals they have scored away from home in the league this season have mostly come from range. And the one that beat your bet or made it a loser against Brentford in the Cup was Morgan Whittaker scoring from 30 yards. He can do that, right? We know that. But he's probably not going to be in the squad here because massive fallout Wednesday night. Whittaker not in the squad. Muslic afterwards saying he didn't show up amid transfer speculation. And so I think a team with an 800-mile round trip who have a day less rest than their significantly superior opposition. It'll be a frosty flight or bus journey, I think, given the Whittaker situation. I would imagine there are a few players in that squad, Whittaker potentially included, who would have liked to have seen Stephen Schumacher reappointed. Instead, they went for a new man. It's not their old friend Shuey. And I just think the vibes are terrible. Sunderland to beat Argyle to nil at 11-10 is my best bet of the weekend.
It's my next best. And not much to add. It just seems very obvious value to me. And it's another example of why I think these win to nil bets are just massive value. You've got a Sunderland side who, if you look at their defensive record at home in particular, they average the 3rd fewest shots against them per 90 at home, just over 8. Argyle have the 2nd fewest shots taken away from home at 7.36. So if 7.36 is the average for Argyle and 8 is the average for Sunderland, and at the top and bottom of each table, then the chances are it's going to be much, much lower here. I just can't really make a case for why we'd expect Argyle to create many chances. Yes, they might score. Yes, they might score a long shot or whatever else, but they're not going to be a relentless attacking threat unless they massively change their form. So even though I've come unstuck doing this recently in the Brentford game, it's, say this is a 2-on shot rather than even money shot. 2-on shots do lose, but it doesn't mean it's not value. So very strong in agreement with you that Sunderland is a big value play.
I wonder what percentage of total league games this season have been 1-0 by Leeds, Sheffield United, Burnley and Sunderland, because they are just head and shoulders, aren't they? Head and indeed shoulders. And my next best is in League 2. It's actually Gillingham to beat Tranmere, draw no bet applied. The price with AK Bets, 11-8. This is basically a bet placed on my theory that Gillingham have made a change in manager that will see performances improve, John Coleman coming in, and equally on the other side, that Tranmere are playing and have been playing for a long time now at a very consistently poor level. And I think there's some quite intense panic setting in, and there's seemingly nothing proactive being done to change it in the form of either player recruitment or a managerial change, as is traditional during runs like this. Gillingham-wise, I really believe they looked better against Doncaster in the first half an hour of that game last Saturday. We haven't got a lot to go on, and they did still lose the game. And they showed that they're still quite low on confidence as a unit, with one silly mistake that led to a Doncaster goal. And then, in fairness, Donny winning relatively comfortably. Gills didn't handle that setback well, and there is, therefore, still an issue in mentality within the squad. I happen to think those things don't have to last forever. A team that looks low on confidence and making sloppy errors and responding poorly to going down a goal down, that could last the whole season. I think often it doesn't last the whole season. But to me, I'm taking the first half an hour of that game where they were in the ascendancy as a positive sign that Coleman will make a positive impact at Gillingham. Now, they have been a poor side this season. There's no doubt about that. But the saving grace is they've got the 5th best defence in the league per goals conceded. Only 4 teams in League 2 have conceded more. Tranmere, who host them, have scored the fewest goals in the league. So on a very basic level, I'm looking at basically the worst attack in the division coming up against a top 6, top 8 defence, probably in Gillingham. Now, Tranmere got a third of their points in August when they started quite well. But since the start of September, they've picked up the 2nd fewest points in League 2. They've scored the fewest goals. They've conceded the joint most goals. Those are pretty damning stats when we're taking out just 1 month of a season that's lasted 4 or 5 so far. Even the goal difference to me, shows the difference in how poor these two teams have been. Gills, very underwhelming, a -3 goal difference. Tranmere, hugely underwhelming, -21 is their goal difference. They've picked up almost all of their points at home, which is not a great sign here. But you look at the themes here, almost all of those points at home picked up against bottom 8 teams. And there's an argument that Gills could be included in that group, but I think they're just a cut above and will prove to be that under Coleman. Tranmere have also failed to score 5 of their 12 home games. So fans are in revolt mode. And I think if Gills start strongly again here and get ahead here, I think things could get very, very tough for Tranmere. And I think Prenton Park will get pretty toxic. So Gills draw no bet is my next best. For anyone looking to sign up to AK Bets, use the promo code NTT100. The link's in the show notes. The offer is if your first bet is an accumulator on football with a minimum of 4 selections, then AK Bets will boost any profit gained on that initial bet by 25% in the form of a free bet and up to a value of £100. The T's and C's are accessible on the website. Click the link in the show notes to take advantage of the sign-up offer if you're thinking of signing up to AK Bets today. Who's your goal scorer?
My goal scorer is David McGoldrick to score 2 or more goals at 10-1 for Notts County at home to Bromley. Now, he's done this in his last 2 games. So for many people, that would be a reason to back them. I would normally...
You're 2 weeks late.
I'd normally really go against that because, if you score back-to-back braces, the chances are that's going to probably stop relatively soon. No one just scores back-to-back braces. However, there's one of the weirder statistical quirks involved in this where, I don't know if you've seen this, in these 2 games. So for the most part of the season...
As you were talking, I've just looked one thing up and I think it's what you're about to say.
Yeah, so this season for... before these 2 games where McGoldrick scored 4 goals, Alassana Jatta had 12 goals and McGoldrick was on 8. They're now both level on 12 goals. Jatta played 70 minutes against Swindon and 80 minutes against Accrington. He had 1 shot in both, so 2 shots total, having been their kind of main goal threat for the most part of the season. David McGoldrick had 10 shots against Swindon and 6 shots against Accrington. What? That is absolutely crazy. That's like, I don't know, Darwin Núñez last season playing for Liverpool at home against someone bad. Like, this is that you don't often see players having that many shots.
Except David McGoldrick is actually good at finishing. Hey,
who's the better finisher, Darwin Núñez or David McGoldrick? What a question that is. So yeah, even though he scored, he's obviously scored 4 of those shots, but 4 from like 16 isn't the most. Normally, the reason that I wouldn't want to back a player to score 2 braces is because realistically, they've probably been really clinical. But with McGoldrick, it's the finishing level isn't that unrepeatable, if that makes sense. So yeah, I mean, he's playing for a team who are odds on in Notts County, who I think are probably a bet at odds on, a shade of odds on against Notts County. He is seemingly, for whatever reason, unlike he's now the key goal threat and the person getting good chances ahead of Jatta. His expected goals from those 2 games is 3.3, so it's kind of pretty much online, averaging, therefore, in the 2 games, like well over 1.5 per game. I think it's a huge price. I think it's a huge price for a team that are bang in form, who will be a relentless attacking threat, and he's clearly the person right now who is the focal point of that. So 10-1 Didsey to score another brace, 3 braces in a row, that would be. Did he score 2 consecutive hat-tricks last season? Am I making that up?
I can't remember.
If he did, that helps. If he didn't, ignore it.
I really want to say that David McGoldrick is a better finisher than Darwin Núñez with every fibre of my being. But also, it is worth pointing out, because I just remembered this from when Sheffield United were in the Premier League and McGoldrick was playing for them. He was underperforming his XG at Premier League level, probably more than anyone in the league at that time. I think he might have, at one point, he hadn't scored a Premier League goal yet, and he'd had like 40 shots.
And now we're enjoying the sweet variance.
Yeah. FB Ref reckons he scored 10 Premier League goals from 15 expected. So, I mean, who can say? All I know is that if you gave him Darwin Núñez's man bun and Darwin Núñez's physical attributes, you'd have maybe the best player in the world. My goal scorer is Zach Jules, Rotherham centre-back. 16-1 AK Bets have offered me for him to score any time for Rotherham at Burton. A couple of weeks ago, I picked Carl Pidge, Pierre Gianni to score against Burton, and rattled off some reasons why I thought Burton were vulnerable from set pieces. That game was postponed, so I'm going back to the well here, and I'm really pleased, as it was with Stevenage and Pierre Gianni, a team who really make the most of their set piece situations and lean into being a team that really want to pump the ball into the box and ask questions aerially of weak defences. Rotherham very much that under Steve Evans as well. Some of the delivery that they produced against Charlton was particularly notable. I think in Joe Powell in particular, but also Reece James, also Joe Rafferty from the right, Alex McDonald when he drifts wide. They just have some very good players at crossing the football. And from dead ball situations, you'd expect Rotherham to have plenty of them. They win among the highest amount of corners in the league, and Burton give up plenty as well. And they're certainly going to be delivering it into the box from all over. Steve Evans makes no bones about putting teams under pressure if he feels that they might be weak aerially. Burton are that, I believe. The Opta site was down this morning when I was doing my research, but I think they'll have only played 1 or 2 league games since I did my spiel about them the other day. So, the stats there were that they'd conceded the third most set-piece goals per 90, just over 1 in every 2 games, and the 4th most set-piece shots total in League One. They've conceded to centre-backs Fernandez of Peterborough and Mikael Helik of then Huddersfield, now Oxford United, in the last couple of weeks. And so I think they could be vulnerable. Jules doesn't have a great goal-scoring record, to be fair, albeit he did score last time out against Charlton. I just wanted a Rotherham centre-back onside, and because of their quirk at the moment, having moved Odoffin back from midfield into the defence, he's priced up around 6-7 to 1, which I just don't think represents value for the position that he plays. Whereas Jules at 16 to 1 is going to be very much in the mix and hopefully getting on the end of some good deliveries. So Zach Jules is my goal scorer, 16 to 1 anytime with AK bets. Long shot.
My long shot is Cheltenham 1, Salford 0 at 8 to 1. Salford obviously off the back of some very strong form, but as I mentioned, beaten last time out against Fleetwood. This is kind of a Carl Robinson trait bet where he's no Lee Johnson. I want to make that very clear. But he's streaky.
He's
a streaky Carl.
When we talked about it on the Monday pod the other day, and I think you were talking about him maybe in the mid-season predictions, I literally was going to say, is he the streakiest manager in the EFL now that Lee Johnson is not a manager in the EFL?
Yeah, probably.
Because your point then was so spot on. Every season that I can remember for Oxford under Robinson was like 12 games in, you're 21st, having been projected to finish 6th or 7th, and everything seems terrible. And then all of a sudden you pull together a run and end up finishing 6th or 7th. And the same...
You pull together a run where you're 3rd, and you think, well, there's automatic on, and then you end up either finishing just outside the playoffs. Exactly. And that's what Salford are doing now. It's classic Carl. There's going to be a bad run that follows a good run, and maybe that defeat against Fleetwood is an indication that we're going to see them go on a bad run. I don't think they're going to suddenly start shipping loads of goals. I think their defence is good enough that it'll be relatively low margin. Cheltenham aside, who are relatively strong at home, that don't see loads of goals in their home games either. They've won a couple of games already, 1-0. So basically this is a game where it'll be pretty tight. There won't be loads of chances, but I'm fairly, not certain, but pretty sure. No, not pretty sure. I think there is a fair chance that that these going forward will Salford are going to have a bit of a form dip. And if I'm right and this is a low-scoring game, then Cheltenham to win at 1-0 seems like a fair way to play it. So Stefan Negri back for Salford's good news for them, to be fair, from a defensive standpoint. He's been really good for them first half of the season. He was recalled and then sent back out on loan there to continue his development. But yeah, I think 8 to 1 is a plenty big enough to get involved.
Yeah, my long shot is 7 to 1. It's a 1-0 double down in League 2, where the 1-0 prices are still a little juicier than those Championship prices. Colchester 1-0, first and foremost, my big League 2 stance team. And they've kept 8 clean sheets in their last 11 games, which is why I'm feeling pretty good about their sort of fairly slow ascent up the table. They're not matching it with much on the attacking end, which means that they're drawing a lot of games rather than winning too many. All 6 of their wins this season have been 0. They have drawn an absurd amount of games, but I do believe that in most of those draws, they are probably the better side, and I think overall that would tip into the win column eventually. They're playing at home to Morecambe, who are obviously second bottom of the league. A statement released today by the board of directors, again calling out and criticising the owner, who is not providing proof of funds necessary. It means that the club can't recruit at the moment in January. Clearly, they're a club that would get a lot out of adding a couple of quality players for Derek Adams to work with. So up against it a little bit. And the breakdown of Morecambe's results is pretty mad. They haven't beaten anyone above 17th in the league. All 5 of their wins have been against the bottom 8. But against teams 16th and above, they've lost 11 games to nil out of a total of 17 fixtures. I think Collier are in that group, so I instinctively like it. And there's the fact they've kept 8 clean sheets in their last 11 games. Collier to nil is the first leg of the double. And the second is your nap Fleetwood. Your stance, Fleetwood, to win to nil at home to Carlisle. You've already discussed why. They were actually my next best at one point. So there was a world where we might have had sort of double nap next bests, but flipped the other way around. I'm glad we changed that. Otherwise, it would have been quite a dull show. I watched Carlisle last week. I think some of the players they've bought might be better than what they had. I think some of them might be more suited to the style that Mike Williamson is playing, but it didn't really show itself against Bradford. They still look really unsure what to do in possession, not just in the final third to create shots and chances, but actually just getting there and staying there. A real repeated snapshot from that game was Carlisle playing short from a goal kick, completing a few short passes at the back with like decreasing confidence, and then just pumping it long to Joe Hugill with no one near him, who invariably lost their header. So given that Pete Wild's skill, and I think Fleetwood already showing it, is that out of possession, he's excellent. He can get them really well drilled and able to execute a game plan. I think a Pete Wild out of possession team against a low confidence possession team in Carlisle at home, win to nil, I like a lot. The double there on the special section of the AK Bets website is backable at 7-1. It's already been built for you to back on the special section of the site. That leaves us with the under squad. It's at 9-1. Also available to back, pre-packaged on the AK Bet special section. Who are your 2 under 2.5 goals picks for the weekend?
Despite the way that the game, that the Charlton selection went last week, I am retaining the faith in shorting Charlton goals. Charlton host Shrewsbury, and for that to be 5 to 6 under 2.5 seems mad to me. Yes, Charlton aside under Nathan Jones, who've been, for the most part, very defensively strong. Yeah, their games recently have seen more goals, but against the Shrewsbury side, who Gareth Ainsworth has kind of properly done the whole make us hard to beat job, I would say. And I'd be, really surprised if this was a game where they didn't do the same thing. 2 defences who should be relatively on top, in my mind, and a game of a few chances. And normally Charlton games so short for under 2.5, but in this case, I think at 5 to 6, you're getting a really good price. And then Fleetwood Carlisle, again, that I mentioned in my next best. As I say, Pete Wilder, a manager you want to follow in terms of good defensive records and strong defensive showings. Carlisle really struggling from an attacking standpoint at the moment. Defensively, they're okay. Like, they're not conceding loads of goals, but just a completely blunt attacking force. And I think Fleetwood should run out fairly comfortable winners. And as we mentioned, you back them to nil as well, which is another reason to think this should be a fewer goals.
Yeah, nice. So we've got ourselves in a bit of a situation with that Fleetwood game. It's basically going to be full focus now. It's your nap as part of my long shot, win to nil, and under 2.5 goals the quad. So we really need that to be 1-0 or 2-0 to Fleetwood. Yeah, I'm adding my 2 pennies in the form of Lincoln and Peterborough under 2.5 goals. Is around the even money mark generally, which I think is really interesting. I'm sure it's because Peterborough are involved and obviously they're an incredibly goalsy team historically and generally. I think there are signs that in the last couple of weeks, they have decided that one of the ways to stop the bleeding, stop the slide down the table, which has them now in 19th, is to try desperately and defend for the first time in I don't know how many years. I think we can see that a bit in the results recently. It was 1-0 they lost against Wrexham, 87th minute winner for Wrexham. It was 0-0 against Leyton Orient, a game against away an Orient side in good form. They only faced 1 shot on target that day. And then a 1-1 draw against Exeter in midweek this week, where they gave away the most mindless penalty you've ever seen in injury time, which was saved and the rebound scored. So A, could and should have been a clean sheet if Teo Eden doesn't make a silly tackle, and B, 2 of Exeter's 5 shots on target are in that penalty incident, the penalty and the rebound. So again, I think there's some signs in the shot data that Peterborough are starting to tighten up and basically realising that they need to do that in order to stop the bleeding. So I quite like that because Lincoln are not a very goalsy team in my head. I think in 0-0 draws at home to Stevenage and Wigan, and Charlton as well, they've shown that they do sometimes find it quite difficult to break teams down. They're not great as an in-possession attacking team. and they've been really low on goals recently. Their last 3 games have all gone unders, and they've barely scored in the last couple of months. So I like Lincoln and Peterborough, particularly at the prices. I really think that is good value, the single for under 2.5 goals. And I'm going to add the Cheltenham Salford game as well in this. You've already talked about it. You've picked Cheltenham to beat Salford 1-0. I think that the tactical setup for this game probably means that it's not going to be a game with a ton of goalmouth action as I see it. And I hope it's 1-0 to Cheltenham, because that'd be great for your long shot, be great for the unders quad as well. So the quad in its totality is Lincoln and Peterborough, Charlton and Shrewsbury, Fleetwood and Carlisle, and Cheltenham and Salford City. You can back it at 9-1 on the special section of the AK Bets website. That'll do for the betting show this week. I do just want to mention that on the NTT20 squad, which is our community of both EFL and NTT20 lovers, we've got an incredible thing going over there, have done for a good couple of years. It's an amazing community of really passionate EFL fans. There is also a specific thread for betting, the NTT20 betting channel, and that is a very smart and supportive community full of people who enjoy betting on the EFL like us. And it's been an incredible week on there. I mean, there's always good knowledge being shared. There's bits of team news, really interesting bits of information that always get shared on there. Loads of stuff that people like to bet on that you and I don't necessarily have much interest in. And I think that's to its benefit as well. And this week, in basically the first 3 days of the week, there were some, it's just one of those weeks where some of the picks that people shared on there won at 55-1, 42-1, 33-1, 12-1, 9-1, 8-1. Some good stuff around Cucurella goal minutes and Ben Wilmot goal last night too. So, to be clear, these aren't picks that are shared by George and I, albeit we do sometimes weigh in on things that we've seen that we think are worth flagging up. These are by others on NTT20's betting squad, and it's a really great place. I think a really good and I think impressive, smart betting community online. So if you're interested in joining, why not drop us a DM? You can do that on Instagram or Twitter, or the podcast's email address is ntt20.pod@gmail.com. We can send you the link if you're interested in signing up to NTT20 Squad. There is a monthly subscription fee. I think it's important to say. George, please recap your selections, please, and we'll ride off into the weekend sun.
Yeah, my nap is Fleetwood to beat Carlisle at 10-11. Next best, Sunderland to 0. Your nap at 11-10. David McGoldrick scored 2 or more goals for Notts County home to Bromley at 10-1 as my goal scorer. And my long shot is Cheltenham 1, Salford 0.
My nap, Sunderland win to 0, 11-10 at home to Argyle. Next best, Gillingham draw no bet away at Tranmere 11-8. Both those with AK Bets, as is Zach Jules 16-1 to score for Rotherham against Burton. My long shot is a win to 0 double. Colchester to win to 0 against Morecambe. Fleetwood to win to 0 against Carlisle. 7-1 the double available to back on the special section of the AK Bets website. And the under 4.5 goals quad is at Lincoln against Peterborough, at Charlton against Shrews, at Cheltenham against Salford, and at Fleetwood against Carlisle. Thanks to AK Bets for sponsoring this podcast, and to you for listening or watching on YouTube. It's been great to have you, and we wish you all the best this weekend. Go well, be lucky. Thanks for listening.